Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another product job search series. My name is Shavi. I'm a product manager at LinkedIn and host of the show today. This is the third episode of a four-part series. So make sure you introduce yourself in the chat, where you're joining us from and what you're most excited to learn. So I am running this four-part series with Phil Terry, author of the Never Search Alone, founder of Collaborative Game, and has devoted, the last 25 years to help top talents in the internet and product management world, building great product companies and careers. And Phil has just shown you the book where he had 400 drafts, test and learn, just like how you would test products and make sure that it's most useful and impactful to all the job seekers like you out there. So thank you so much for joining us again. For you might know that 2 weeks ago, we had our first kickoff session, right, Phil, with our very special guest, Marty Kagan. We talk about the power of the Never Search Alone approach and some of the special considerations regarding product job search. If you want to do a replay of that session, make sure you check out the details tab of this event so that you can access the link to watch a replay. And last week, we also talked to a very special group of panelists about how to form and lead a job search console and why we need that social support, that accountability to really improve our job search process, both for emotional support as well as to uncover, blind spots. Today, we're actually going to talk about something really, really important, how to find candidate market fit to land good jobs at the intersection of our hopes, dreams, and also the market realities. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I can't wait to dive in. So again, introduce yourself in the comment, share with us where you're joining us from. And before we dive in and introduce our panelists, Phil, if you can just maybe say a few words about what is Never Search Alone.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Shivi. And you are an amazing host. And we should all applaud you. And I'll do that again. I'll ask that again.
Thank you.
It's really remarkable, the contributions you're making to the product community worldwide. Really happy to be here. As Shivi said, this is part 3 of a 4-part series. We had Marty Kagan 2 weeks ago, and actually the link was just put in chat. So if you want to watch that, or as Shivi said, go to the details page after the recording today. There we go. Sarah Meese, who's a member of the volunteer team. There's a group of volunteers working with me to build this free community for job seekers around the world, the Never Search Alone community. I actually want to just call out also a couple of people. Anna Lena Koenig has come every week and done visual note taking. Have you seen this? It's absolutely remarkable, and she's doing it again today. She's in Switzerland. And Faith Manganwa from Namibia is here, which is great. Really happy to see, the breadth of folks from around the world. There are 3 big ideas. 3 big ideas in Never Search Alone. The first is the title of the book, Never Search Alone. Instead, form what we call a job search council. Job search council. That's where you bring peer job seekers together to support each other through the whole search. And this is important because the biggest insight, the most important insight that we got over 25 years of research is that no matter who you are, a CEO with a public company track record, let's say, a college student looking for your first job, a VP of product, a chief product officer, individual contributor, whatever, no matter who you are, when you're in the job search, you feel anxious and insecure. And it turns out the best way to manage that and turn it into hope and motivation and confidence is to form a job search council, which is what we talked about last week. That's the first big idea. The second big idea is what we're going to talk about today, candidate market fit. And Shivi said it so well. It's the intersection of your hopes and dreams. And this is crazy, but most people don't pause for a minute to think about what they want. What do you want? What do you want? That's so important. We want you to take a moment. What do you want? And then sanity check that against the market, just like you would with a product, right? In the job search, your skills and experience are the product you're essentially selling to an employer. Right. So we've taken that concept we all know in the product world, product market fit, and twisted it for the job search, candidate market fit. We're going to talk more about that today. The third idea, which we're going to get into next week, the third big idea is there are 4 legs to the compensation stool. Comp is just one. You need to negotiate for everything you need to succeed, not just budget, resources, support. And there's a really key tool, Job Mission with OKRs, that supports that. We're going to talk about that next week. Super important. But this week, we're going to talk about that third idea, the candidate market fit. All right, Shivi, was that a good introduction? You ready to?
Yes. Thank you. 3 parts. And I just want to, before we bring up our panelists, say hi to some folks. Rachana joining us from Canada. Feel like you mentioned Annalena helping us with sketch notes taking. Kudos to that. A bunch of folks, Clark, Caitlin, dialing in from San Francisco, Jamie from Virginia, Catherine from Berlin, and a lot more folks. Thank you so much for joining us. And please continue to introduce yourself and drop in the chat questions that you have for Fio and for our panelists. Now, without further ado, let me bring up both Lily and Alan. So Lily Wilson, currently the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Angi. Lily Wilson is a business strategy and ops leader with over 10 years of experience in strategic planning, growth, operational effectiveness, and program management. Welcome to the show, Lily. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And Lily's also a pioneer, Shivi. She was one of the first Job Search Council members. She helped in the early days of the book read drafts and put this all into practice. So wonderful to have you.
She's part of the 400 drafts tester.
And it was a huge help to me. So happy to be here.
That's awesome. And then next up, we have Anonymous Ellen. So Ellen's a decade-plus veteran of a Fortune 100 company, currently leads a large product management teams responsible for both digitally transforming how the company makes its product, as well as integrating that new digital process into the company's end-to-end value chain. So Ellen has a very, very big job. Welcome to join us, Ellen.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here with everybody.
And Alan is off camera because he's anonymous.
We'll make it a little mysterious.
Yeah, flying stealth today.
All right, awesome. And then we have a lot of folks joining from Nigeria, from Serbia, from Vermont, Toronto, Seattle, and Pakistan, Israel. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's get started. Phil, we mentioned about finding product candidate market fit, similar to product market fit, right?
Right.
Is actually the first step is inward looking, knowing what our hopes and dreams are.
Yeah.
So, what do we like to do? What do we hate to do? The must-haves, the must-not.
Yeah.
And our career goals. You call this the Manukin 2-pager.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about it. Like, first of all, where does this name came from? Why is this exercise so important?
Yeah. So once you form your job search council, the first exercise we ask all the job seekers to do is to fill out their Manukin 2-pager. Manukin. It's named after Allison Manukin. Allison was a senior leader at Intuit. Everyone knows that company in Silicon Valley, software company. She then spun out a division of the company, became CEO, did that for several years, and is now a professor at the Harvard Business School. Allison and I have also known each other for 3 decades, and she was a longtime member of Collaborative Gain. And about 10 years ago, she was at a crossroads and thinking about what she wanted to do next. And she and I worked together, but she really kind of developed this, which is why I call it the Manukin 2-pager. She sat down and thought about what did she want and what did she not want. And by the way, the not want is I actually ask people to start there because it's easier to kind of think about what you don't want. People are ready with that. And then address what you do want and what your career goals and hopes and dreams are, right? And again, as I mentioned earlier, people don't do this. They don't pause for a moment to think about what they want. And that's the first step. And then we'll talk in a moment about the listening tour. But maybe we could have Lily and Alan talk a little bit about that Manukin 2-pager process. What was that like for you, Lily?
Yeah, I'll go first. I kind of referenced back to my Manukin 2-pager before coming here and was kind of cracking up because it's spot on in the sense of I knew I was unhappy in my current role, but it really helped me understand why and get really granular with that, even from like a larger standpoint of like, I don't like keeping up with cool trends. I literally wrote that in my 2-pager. I don't like knowing what's cool and having to follow social media trends or anything like that. Not to say that's not awesome. It just wasn't part of something that brought me joy. And then also getting really granular on like, what do I want my day to look like? Do I want to be in meetings? Do I want to be around other people more? Do I want to be an individual contributor more? So it's really helpful to kind of test that out of why am I not enjoying this today?
And can you share with us a little bit more detail? Do you mind saying like how do you want to spend your day?
Yeah. So I realized I was working for a startup, which was awesome. And I went there for many reasons, but because it was such a small company, I was doing a lot of the work myself. And I was like, I actually want to be in meetings. I really enjoy being in meetings. I'm an extrovert. I like having my day full of that, which is funny because I know many people hate them, but I really like them and missed that aspect. Let's see, I like a lot of cross collaboration and working across a team. So it didn't feel like it was all on my shoulders.
Yeah.
As well
Can
as
I just pause for a moment and say that thing about like you like to be in meetings, right? So there's no right answer here. The answer is, what do you want, right? Yeah, yes, a lot of people hate being in meetings, but it turns out you like being in meetings. Like, okay, wow, that seems really important to like own that. Like that's who I am, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It felt, and exactly to that point of switching it into confidence, the 2-pager kind of allowed me to do that. I had taken a previous job because I wanted to work on my weaknesses and like expand my experience. The MOOC and 2-pager helped me really understand what are my strengths and what do I actually want out of this job, which allowed me to approach the job search from a place of like strength and confidence and feeling like I was doing the search for myself, not searching for a job like the other way around. Right. I was interviewing them more than they were interviewing me.
That's right. And we're going to talk about that today and next week. You are the boss of your job search, right? You are in control. I want you to be in the driver's seat. You don't control everything, but you have to drive it. Fantastic. Alan, what would you add to, or what was your experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I really echo what Lily just said. And I think it's key to understand, right? If we are the products, right? You can't sell your product unless you understand your product. And I think it's funny how much until you actually do.
That's a great way. Okay, wait, can you say that one more time? That's a keeper of a quote. Say that again.
Yeah, I mean, you can't sell your product unless you understand your product. And I think it's really interesting that we all kind of assume that we know who we are and what we want. But until you actually run through the process, the Manuka being the critical first step of that, being very much an introspective process at first, and then becomes a very, collaborative one and one with, as we'll get and talk more about the listening tour and whatnot. But it amazed me until I forced myself to sit down what is a relatively simple document, right? Like it's a 2-pager. You can get your hands around it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But if you actually do it right, you really learn things like, hey, some people are crazy and like to go to a lot of meetings like Lily, and for me, I learned things that I hadn't thought about, I hadn't put together. And I think doing that.
Can you say, Alan, can you give us an example? Like, what do you remember what you found that you hadn't thought about?
I mean, I think for, some of them were pretty clear. Like I struggle with, a lot of bureaucracy and whatnot. But what I realized was one of the places that I hadn't really thought about that came out through my Manukan and the conversation I had around it was kind of the breadth of role and how you think about, narrowness and focus and specificity versus, having a lot of ambiguity and change in that. And for me, even though I've worked for a very large company for a long time now, I see myself and feel myself as being more entrepreneurial and liking that breadth. And the Manukan helped me understand that in a way that is helping me as I think about my next step.
Yeah.
Because, you can go to another very large company and you can have actually a big team and a big role, but you're actually pretty functionally siloed. Right. And so I discovered something in that I found really directionally helpful. Right. Or sorry, helping me shape the direction that I'm going in now by being like, where am I going to find, an experience that's going to give me that level of breadth and that level of, frankly, ambiguity of what I might be doing every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really eye-opening process. And again, I just think it's amazing. We all think you know yourself, right? But until you actually go through some of these, you really don't. Even if you've been in the, we're all kind of, the idea here, the focus is on mid-career job switches. And I think that, I have 20 years or so of experience and I still learned a lot by going through this. It's worth that effort.
Yeah. And let me add, and this transitions us, to, Shivi, if you don't mind, so one of the challenges of the Manukan 2-pagers, people will often say, I don't know what I want, So I say, okay, fine. Don't worry. The first draft is not set in stone. just draft it out and start with what you don't want. Cause you know what, again, that's easier. Start there and then, work your way into, oh my God, I love meetings. I love that. I'm never going to forget that. Cause again, it's like, it's part of what, like, it's embraced. Say that again.
I said, I do. I'll own that with confidence. I love meetings.
Yeah. Own that with confidence. Like, who are you? It's like, wow. And there's a bunch of employers going, oh, we have to hire Lily. She loves meetings. We have a lot of meetings here. Alan's like, boy, we have meetings. You want to come over here? So, but don't worry about getting it right in the first draft. Just start working with it. And then you're going to get input from your fellow members on your job search council. Each of you are going to share yours with, so everyone gets to see everyone's Manukan, and sometimes you're going to, I like that too. Or, I don't like, you're going to learn from your fellow members, and then you're going to go out and you're going to do a listening tour. Now, this is really important. We were talking about this last night. Sometimes people think the listening tour is like the networking and interviewing, which is understandable because the conventional job search is to just start networking and interviewing. We're saying, no, pause, set up a job search council, think about what you want, and then do some research. Like, many of you who are here today are product managers. You wouldn't release a product without any insight into your customer. Well, that's the same here, right? So you got to go out and have these conversations. Now you're going to learn things about the market, but you're also going to learn about yourself because in these conversations. So maybe we can shift gears now and talk a little bit about the listening tour. There's 3 kinds of conversations I outlined in the book: reverse exit interviews, golden question, and recruiter interviews. Lily, could you start us off? Did you do all 3 or pick one and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of starting with the reverse interviews.
Say what that is too, so people know what the reverse exit interview is. Do you remember? Yeah.
Well, what I did was kind of talk to my peers and my coworkers around, and I did have the benefit of, I chose to actually leave my company before having a new one. So that allowed me to directly talk to my peers about my performance, as well as just kind of get their insight of what the most shocking thing to me was how accurate we talked about the Manukan 2-pager was about learning yourself and realizing that you don't really know yourself until you write it down. What's interesting is they can pick up on those things. So they were able to identify, like, you really enjoyed this project and you performed really well because of it. And that those things were this, and this, versus this project, I could tell that you just weren't in it. Like, you shouldn't do things that bring you that way, which you don't have to. So it was really interesting to be able to see myself through their eyes, as well as gain their insights around other people that they know that have similar strengths or similar things that they want, and be able to expand me to those networks to even continue to learn more.
Yeah. Shivi, are you okay with how we're going here?
Yeah. No, I was just trying to highlight a couple ones that really resonate with the Manukan 2-pager as a process to, create this eye-opening experience, knowing what the clarity of your next goal, and then allowing yourself permission in this transformation. I know Kaylin called it out, that is extremely important for those with ADHD and the benefits that it creates. And then, like you said, Phil, like, I know that we'll transition to the listening tour, but just want to close this one out as this being an evolving document. It's not said and done. Like, once you draft it, right, you continue to refine it. It's a living and breathing document. So I think it resonates a lot with the LinkedIn community. Maybe, Lily, thanks for sharing your experience. Ellen, if you can just maybe talk about your experience as well. And I'm curious. So there's 2 parts to it. One is the reverse exit interview, where you ask about your strengths, your weaknesses, like how you can improve better. And then there's the golden question session, where you ask about, like, hey, if you were me, like, what kind of opportunity would you choose for? Like, are they 2 separate sessions? Do you talk to 2 different groups of people for it, or you usually combine them? Like, how do you go about having this conversation?
Yeah, so I've used all 3 of these kind of interview types, if you will. So the reverse exit, the golden question, and then the recruiter interviews. I actually did a recruiter interview this morning, which was fun. And so I kind of put it to work just very recently. I think all can be super valuable. And I've actually used the golden question across all three of them, right? There's certain people who you want to ask that question to specifically, but it's even been a very valuable question to talk to recruiters about and talk to people who you work with. Now, I haven't left my business, and so I structure and do some of the reverse interviews in kind of a slightly different manner just to make it work for my personal situation here. But I'm able to get that same feedback from people. And it's amazing how many people really resonate with the core concept, I think, at the center of this book, which is, one, never do this stuff alone, right? And that's a philosophy that doesn't have to apply just to a career search. It can be to how you manage your career within a big company as well. But then that second piece, it really is about how do you think about yourself as a product? Right. And so I think about these as just getting feedback more and more. And it's really just refined for me massively about not only what I really want, but how I show up in the marketplace and how people view my experience, especially being at a large company now for more than a decade. And it's helped me because one of the things, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, Phil, because you and I have talked about this before too, but it's very easy for, I think, people who've had successful careers and whatnot to be like, oh, I can go do a lot of different things. Yeah. And what I have found through this process of the Manukin, but then especially what we're talking about here in terms of the kind of interviews that you can use, you really learn that becoming very specific is the best thing that you can do. Not only because it's going to help you actually get a role, but it's also going to help you get the role that's right? And so that's where I think this interview process is especially critical, because you are, like, as a product management person, you never take a product to market without getting a bunch of feedback on it. Why wouldn't I do the same for myself? And you can get that from a bunch of different sources. And I think the frameworks in the book help you do that in an effective way. But, I actually, I'll talk to friends, and I'll use it. And it just has helped inform my kind of thinking overall. And I personally love the golden question. I think that one allows people to step a little bit outside of like, oh, I'm giving you feedback, or that might be a bit awkward, or, it just allows them to be like, oh yeah, okay. How, like, if I were you, what would I do? It changes the dynamic and is really valuable as a result.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to actually double click on some of those, Phil and Lily, if you allow me, and Ellen. Sure. So a couple of things. First, let's see how I unpack. I actually have 3 or 4 questions in my mind that I think will be most helpful. I think, Ellen, just on that last point about, getting feedback, asking for feedback, as well as the golden question. We often say feedback is a gift, but sometimes, depending, right? It might be hard, or the feedback giver might not be in a mindset to think about what to give you, like actionable, concrete feedback. They maybe have to think hard to like come up with it. And then sometimes you as a listener, it might be a receiver, it might be hard to listen. So what are some of whether it's the way you frame the question or how you go about it, that will be like most receptive to both, and you get the best out of it. And I think on top of that, one thing I want to ask about, the golden question is, you ask people, hey, if you were me or if you were in my shoes, like, how would you approach this problem? Sometimes it's a little bit like you're going out to customer and you ask them like what stuff they want. They will tell you, I want a faster horse. So how do you find that balance of like, here's that person's perspective and me like thinking through my situation versus being clear on my voice, like my inner voice and what's right for me. So like, I just want to tap onto like some of those nuances around feedback giving and receiving, as well as this, like being in someone else's shoes, giving advice, but you're not actually that person. And how do you reconcile that?
I think that's actually a really great point. It's something that I've learned through this process a little bit is one, I always try to give people ahead of time a context of what I'm going to ask them so they're able to think about it. So I don't, it's not very often I'm just picking up the phone, calling somebody and be like, hey, so if you were me, what would you do? Now, sometimes there's some people in your life who have enough context, you have enough of a relationship with that, frankly, you can do that with. But I try to always give people a heads up. And like when we're scheduling time, what am I seeking? Where am I going to kind of press them for their knowledge? So they have an opportunity to be a bit prepared and not be caught out of the blue on that. And I think that has generally helped. I think the other piece is that, to your point of, what you get back from people, right? I think, again, like any good product manager, you have to take the person's perspective who's giving you that advice in. And that's why you have to do multiple calls, right? Because everybody's going to have a different point of view, and you're going to have to use your knowledge and use your sense of yourself in order to, kind of analyze those and combine them into, one narrative that makes sense for you. And I think it goes back to, why is the Manukin so important? if you don't have that foundation, you're kind of like at the whims of the last person you talk to a little bit.
Yeah.
Versus I'm pulling all this information together and doing analyses around what it means for me and, what it's going to help me be more targeted in how I'm going to go forward and ultimately be happier in what I do. And so, I think it's something that you've got to be very active in. It takes work, but also, to make it most valuable, give people a little bit of heads up, give them a little bit of an agenda of where you're going to be, seeking what you're going to be seeking from them. And I found that people, especially if you say, hey, I'm going to ask you, if you were me, what would you do? They take that like especially seriously. Cause I think it's a big one. People love to help, right? That's a core tenet to what Phil always talks about. It's like, you're not burdening people. Right. Actually, people love to help, especially if you do it in a way that's appreciative, in a way that's very gracious to them. But, you have to be the one who ultimately owns and drives this journey. And I think it's there's a question in here about what if you don't want to be specific. And I think that's something we should actually talk about a little bit later. But I think it's really important as you go through this too, because I didn't want to be specific at first either, but to go through this journey and make sure that you are I guess what should I say? It takes quite a bit of work and you want to be diligent about it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Lily, what would you add to what Alan was saying, or did you have a different experience?
No, just building upon, I think it's like, one, you go to people that you trust and you respect their opinion about you and kind of where you want to go or potentially, but you don't have to take all of the feedback. You understand that everybody's in a different place. Everybody has different goals of their own. And that's why starting with the must-haves and what must-nots is very impactful, and kind of the order that it's laid out of. You get to know yourself. And so you're approaching it from a place of confidence that allows you to receive that feedback and take it for what you want to do next with it. It's also just, you are in your own head about your own life so much, especially when it comes to a career, especially if you haven't left your company yet. So just hearing other people's perspectives and insights and their experiences is so powerful. And I think what was really helpful for me was the Job Search Council, and that there was a COO of a bank in there. And I was like, he is approaching this from the same place I am, of like, I need to get to know myself, and I'm vulnerable by seeking out this feedback, but it's going to help me and help me grow and help me make the best decision next. So it is scary. I did find that I was able to shift the conversations to be more casual than I thought they were going to be, which was really nice. So as soon as I got over the first hump, it made it easier to have the next one. And now I actually take that golden question into my day-to-day of, if I'm approached with a problem at work, I ask my team, if you were me, how would you handle this? So it's a good question for life outside of job seeking as well.
Yeah, totally. Love that, Lily.
I think,
No, go ahead, Shivi. Yeah.
Just like what I guess what Alan said earlier too, like people love to help, right? Like asking them for advice builds trust, and they'll make them feel like they're a part of your team. That's like, their advice is valued and you care about their opinion. And I think John mentioned earlier, like reverse exit interviews are actually extremely powerful because, people are willing to open up and like giving you, and they're grateful for the opportunity to be part of your growth team. So I think, instead of us feeling like anxious and like, oh, I'm reaching out to people to ask for this, I think it's actually, empowering for them too. So it becomes like a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah. And I think just one thing to add on it is, in order to have people be able to give you that data and that information in a good way, like they have to have the right context into who you are. Right. And so you sometimes it's kind of easy in this process. And I've seen it with people in my JSC to be like, oh, I'm going to ask the CEO for a reverse job, interview. And I kind of say, does he or she actually know enough about you to really be valuable in that? And so I think it's important, whether you're asking the golden question or whether you're, doing some of these other conversations that we're talking about here, make sure that you're asking the right people and, people who understand who you are and know enough about your personal situation to be valuable. Because it's kind of easy to be like, oh, I'm going to make a checklist of all these big names in my company, because that will be, those are the decision makers. Well, frankly, they're not the decision makers where you're going, and they don't know enough about you to be able to help you. So be realistic. And, I found, like some people who you wouldn't expect were some of the best feedback providers for me as I was asking for feedback on my Manukin. I mean, just, folks who aren't involved in my work life at all, but who know me from other angles. And, that was really valuable. So think about that relevance and that relationship you have with the people you're speaking with.
That's awesome.
I love that. Relevance and relationship. I know we have a side debate and conversation about what if I don't want to be specific. Let's come back to that towards the end when we were about to form after we talked to, all the different people. We did the self-reflection. So that's the Manukan 2-pager. Now you sort of talk to the relevant people, to get that perspective on feedback and the golden question of, if you were me, like, what would you go about? Now, the next group is strangers, recruiters, right? It almost feels like you're closer to like talking to the actual customers now, right? Like instead of talking directly to the hiring team.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about, because sometimes I feel like as job seekers, people have very weird relationship with recruiter. They don't know how to leverage them. They don't know what to tell them or how to sometimes the opportunity they share on that useful, sometimes it's really useful. So first of all, how do you find like what type of recruiter to talk to? Maybe that's a starting point. We'll start from there.
Sure. Alan, so I'll just say this. In the book, we say, in the listening tour, you're talking to recruiters at this point, not to get a job, but for their advice. And recruiters love it because no one asks them for their advice. And I say 3 questions. Ask them, what could you do tomorrow? What could you do that might be a stretch? And what's outside your ballpark? And then you kind of can go from there. Alan, did you do that this morning with the recruiter?
I didn't do it quite as formally as you just laid out, but essentially I did do that. And I was fortunate. We can talk about how you find the right set of recruiters as well. But I have found in the conversations that I've had there, down to the last one, every single recruiter has been very willing to help and kind of change the dynamic from, hey, I got outreach from a recruiter for a specific role and we talked about that role, right? But then actually at the end, towards the end of the conversation, changing the dynamic and saying, hey, can I ask for your thoughts? And I have I've been like, hey, I've been in a big company now for more than a decade and I've been fortunate to have a great accelerated career. It's been wonderful, but I haven't been in the marketplace. Can you help me understand, and they are just effusively eager to talk about that. And, you can ask questions in the way that Phil helps frame it. And kind of take it from there. And so I think it's a really good source of information. Now, to my prior point, they generally do not have the context on you that somebody who's worked with you or known you for a while is. So you have to think about it more actually in terms of, hey, truly, this is how somebody buying a product who doesn't have a lot of experience with it is going to evaluate and think about it and then be willing to help it, right? So, maybe your recruiter is your channel partner, if we're going to pull this analogy like all the way through in terms of, product sales. But I think overall, you can never lose by asking them for help and engagement. And I like the framework because they like to think about building talent and careers over the long term to say, hey, how do you think about it now? Where can I go in that future? And so I found very, very good answers to that. And then sometimes I've been surprised, right? I've been surprised with some of the feedback, and it does depend on who you talk to again. So you've got to analyze and digest this like we spoke about it again. At the end of the day, you own your own journey.
Yeah. Lily, did you have some recruiter conversations?
I didn't speak with recruiters as far as the, what I did do was reach out to hiring managers or try to find in my network. Like if I found jobs that I was like, I'm curious to know more about this. I'm kind of just curious to know more about this person's area. So I reached out to my network and tried to get in touch with people who might have jobs that I was interested in. My job from strategic initiatives, as you can tell, is quite broad and means very different things at very different companies. And I was looking for the fit versus the title. So then I was just learning and curious of what does that title mean at that company? What does this mean here? What do you look for in that? Do my skill sets fit that? So I went on a similar tour of kind of going out to strangers, but not recruiters specifically. But super helpful. And also strangers are very willing and excited to help and talk about it too. So
Totally.
Don't be shy.
Yeah. And it's so helpful again to have a stranger because as Alan was saying, you're saying they're going to give you that instant feedback of what does the market see immediately in you and what don't they see? Also, one of the biggest challenges that people have with the recruiter interviews is they don't know recruiters. And I talk about this in the book. So if you're in a job right now, okay, and a recruiter calls, even if you don't want that job, take the call. build the relationship, help the recruiter, introduce them to people in your network that you think might be interested, because down the road, you want to be able to ask that recruiter for help when you're looking for a job and have an interview like we're talking about now, not a job interview, an interview about your candidate market fit and how the market sees you, right? So it's, we're thinking about like maybe we can build a recruiter community where there's a group of recruiters that are willing to help members of the job search councils, because now we have a couple hundred job search councils running. It's all free. People can sign up for it at phil.org, like my name there. And so Alan had some recruiter relationships. Lily had some hiring manager relationships. Many times people are like, I don't have any of those relationships. What do I do? And, there's not a great answer. So maybe we can come up with a solution. But then again, if you are working today, build those relationships now, because that's going to be really important down the road.
Yeah. All right. I love those examples. And I already see a couple questions being raised, including the earlier one. What if I don't want to be specific, or how specific do I need to get to? I think so. Let's say you did your self-reflection and your Mnookin 2-pagers. You now talk to your colleagues, people who know you, to get feedback on what they think you could work on, and, areas to explore. And then now you talk to recruiters. So you kind of like check in that market reality a little bit. And so it's time to come back, right, after your listening tour. How do you start forming your candidate market fit? Do you come up with this like a statement? Because I know Nava was asking, do you have an example? It's sort of like a product vision statement, right? Like you put in your vision. John raised his hand and say, could this be a good, product candidate market fit statement? Like, how specific do you want to get to? And what was your process, sort of synthesize different source of information to form your candidate market fit
By the
strategy?
way, that second VP of marketing in a medium-sized privately held company, not backed by VC or private equity. We had a job search council member a year ago. That was exactly their candidate market fit statement. And they ended up in that role, and they're so happy. I cannot tell you how happy they are. They really figured out they didn't want to work with VCs and private equity owner. They wanted like a family or privately owned company where there was a real longevity, long-term thinking culture, whatever. And they found that. And so, it's so important. And this is where we also get into, you can't be everything. This is the earlier, you got to pick something specific. I tell Alan and Lily and I talk about, I say in the book, put yourself in a tiny little box. Nobody likes doing that. I don't like doing that either. I get it. But in this, that's how you can market yourself. So Lily, could you talk a little bit about, what was your candidate market fit, and what was your experience of putting yourself in that box? Was that hard to do, easy to do at that point?
Yeah. And I forget my statement specifically, but I know I wrote one. But for me, it was extremely difficult. My boss one time said to me, "You're a jack of all trade, but master of none. So choose your where you want to be a master and go there." But my skill set is cross-functional problem solving and strategic planning of driving kind of large changes across the board. So it's a broad kind of area of interest. But because of the informational interviews I was able to do, I was able to start to really narrow down what the titles and what the skill sets and what the kind of ideal position was that I was really trying to go for, as well as the size of company is very important.
Size of company. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
The size of company is really important. And I think it's also, you kind of have to do those informational interviews or talking to your network to learn the experiences at different size of companies and understand why it's important, or the different struggles you're going to face. So I was able to narrow down size of company. I was able to narrow down like team dynamic, or the fact that I wanted a certain level or position, as well as a certain industry of like, I really like two-sided marketplaces. So that really helped me narrow down the company side of it, and then allowed me to be a little bit more broad with the role specifically, since it was a role that can look very different at different companies.
Yeah. And did that, and I want to, if you don't mind, should we just ask this one follow-up? Did that help you turn down?
Oh yeah.
Like not pursue certain things? Talk about that. Cause again, that's hard, right? Like,
yeah.
Oh gosh, you got to go for everything. No. But yeah.
Yes, it was very hard. I had two other positions that I was considering that I was both super excited about. They were super interesting. And it took me like I had to step backwards and keep on going back to that statement and keep on going back to my must-haves and must-nots to be like, this job has 3 of your must-nots on it, like specifically, but you get so excited and it sounds so cool that you just start to lean that way.
Yeah.
And then going to your network as well as your job search counsel to hold you accountable to say like, no, refer back to this. This is what you said you wanted, and holding yourself accountable to that inward reflection that you did at the beginning is critical, because I was in the offer stage at a different company that would have been a completely different fit for sure.
Yeah, and this is such an easy mistake to make. This is why, like, Gallup last year did this poll, like, you know, remember the Great Resignation, and 75% of the people who had resigned and taken a new job with higher pay were unhappy. Why? Because they took jobs with a whole bunch of things they didn't like, but they didn't, you know, they were like, oh, I'm going to get paid more.
Had a shiny curtain over here, and you
yeah,
went for
shiny,
it.
yeah, exactly. Alan, I know you really struggled with this too. Can you talk about it?
Oh man, yeah. Well, one, I think what Lily said is so valuable and important. I mean, I'll jump back in a second, but once you go through the exercise of doing your Manukin 2-pager and whatnot, I think the advice Lily just gave is you stick to it, right? It's so easy to be like, oh, shiny object over here. Oh, shiny. Oh, it's cool. Oh, somebody called me and they want me. Like, oh, how would I not take that call? And so that's like the second level that you have to be really disciplined and rigorous about. I struggle with a lot at the first level as well, which is actually being able to be specific, not only about what the Manukin 2-pager says, i.e., you know, who you are and the characteristics of it, but then what the tiny little box exercise kind of pushes you for and demands from you, which is, what do you specifically want and who are you? What is the product that you are selling? Because it matches to what you want, who you are, your Manukin, and how does that work? I really struggled. Like I think some other people said in their comments, like could be like, hey, I could, you know, I'm a smart person. I've had a lot of experience. I could go do a lot of things. And how do I actually like narrow that down to something that is specific? And I just didn't want to do it. I said, oh, I don't need one. I'll come up with 5, right? And what I just found throughout my experiencing this is it just doesn't work. You need, like the book is right. Put yourself in the cozy little box and be specific about it. And I can talk about the reasons why that's true, but I'll talk about the most important reason that I've experienced, which is when you're in the marketplace, it is extremely difficult for people to be reductive about who you are, right? So if you're thinking and saying, I can do a million things, nobody finds it easy to say, okay, well, come do this for me, or I have this job and you fit for it. But if you come in and you say, I want to be a product manager at a $500 million plus company that's growth rate on a way to an IPO, right? People will be like, I know who that person is. Their background and experiences support that they're ready for that. But actually, I don't have that job. I have a different job that's related, right? They'll still call you. So people in the marketplace are able to be expansive about thinking about what you can do, but they can't be reductive about it. And I've seen that myself because I've hired hundreds and hundreds of people, and I do the exact same thing. I'm able to take somebody who says, hey, I want to be a product manager in this space and say, you know what? That's true and that's brilliant, but I have this other thing you should consider, and that works out. But somebody who comes in and says, I can be everything to everybody, I don't know what to do with that person. And despite the fact that I've struggled with that personally in terms of hiring people, I made the same bloody mistake. And I really fought the difficulty of being specific in what I want. And now I have a very clear document that says this is specifically what I want. And I've shared that. And that's actually what led to the phone call I had this morning. And the phone call I had this morning actually wasn't for a job that matches 100% to that. It was one where the recruiter took a little bit of a leap and was expansive in saying, hey, I have something, and here are some reasons why I think that might be interesting to you. And you know what? It actually was. And so I'm just a really big believer of holding yourself accountable to being really specific. Even if you think that's going to cut things off, it will not. It will open doors up because people will be expansive, but they cannot be reductive. And so I thank Phil for teaching me that, and personally on one-on-one conversations, yelling it at me a few times, and I finally learned the lesson. Hopefully I can help a few of you guys learn it too.
I like this quote. Easy to be expensive, hard to be reductive. So thanks, Alan.
It's a great quote. And that's Alan's quote. He tells me I taught him this, but he gave that quote. It goes in the next edition of the book. So true. So true. Lily, does that resonate with you as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And like I said, I worked backwards so I could get there and find out what exactly the positions I was going for was. But similarly, like when I'm hiring, it is hard to say, okay, well, yeah, thanks, but like it's easier to turn away because you'll be good at something else, versus if somebody's like, oh, you're perfect for this and I'm excited to have you here, and this also fits what you want to do, I think is the key thing. Is like, you're not going to be happy and you're not going to be the best at your job if it doesn't match what you want out of it as well. Yeah. So that's what it's allowing you to do. And for the recruiter to feel like, oh, this is a perfect job for you. This is great. You're going to be good in here. So yeah, definitely agree.
Cool.
So we're almost coming up at time. Maybe if we were just to a round table of parting advice from Ellen and Lily to folks who are looking to find product market fit. So we talk a lot, in this call. I'm sure folks take away a lot. And what would be your so what? Like if you just leave today's session, remembering that one thing, or no more than 3 things, right? Remember that thing. It'll be the biggest takeaway.
What's our biggest takeaway that we want to kind of parting advice? Is that
for the audience?
Yeah, mine would be just to get to know yourself and take that time to really go deep on your must-haves and must-nots. I think starting with your must-nots is very easy, of getting specific of think about a time when you were unhappy in your career. What specifically was going on? What was your manager doing? What was the environment like? What were you responsible for? What was your day-to-day? And that's how you can kind of really get deep in understanding that piece. And then the must-haves can be like a strong team who's supportive of me, like a boss who shows up to my one-on-ones. It can be very fluffy, or not fluffy, but it doesn't have to be specific to, I want a product manager role, or I want a strategic role, or whatever it may be. It can be more general and allows you to really find out those things that match. So mine included everything from I want to be very collaborative to I want to not be responsible for creative, which is very like actual design. So it can be whatever you want it to be, but it does help you really get to know yourself. And like we mentioned before, it then allows you to hold yourself accountable to this job matches and this job doesn't, and to approach from a place of confidence.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because a lot of times we think about, it's sort of counterintuitive, because you would think about, what do I want to have? And then what do I not want to have is sort of secondary. But what you said reminded me of this quote from Steve Jobs, like innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. And then eventually you have that capacity to say yes to that one thing that you're going to do really, really well. So it's thanks for that part.
That's right. We should, that goes in the next edition. Absolutely.
Lots of good quotes.
That's exactly what we're talking about, Shivi. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Thanks. Ellen, what's your parting advice?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is just trust the process, right? Mm-hmm. Trust the process, and it's been honed and refined. It's a very strong product, right? Trust the process. The second thing would be you got to do the work, right? If you want to find a great job that fits who you are, not just a high pay or not with a big title, but actually one that's going to make you happy and make you, excited to get out of bed every day, you got to do the work. So do the work. And then the third thing, and I don't see this as much directly called out in the book, Phil, but it's definitely like an ethos in who you are and what you promote through collaborative gain and whatnot too, is you really have to be vulnerable, right? If you're going to have to go through this process, you're going to put your heart on the sleeve a little bit, and you're going to think about it as not just, being open and but it really is, it's this discovery process. You're going to learn a lot about yourself too. And so I think it has a lot of, value that's actually broader than just finding that next role in the right way. But to do that, you really have to be vulnerable and be open. And that's especially difficult to do when it comes to a job, because what you want to do is show up all buttoned up and be like, I'm the expert who can handle this thing, and you're going to hire me because maybe that was true a while ago. I don't think that's true. None of the conversations I've had, being super confident and it has been the right way of doing it. Even when you're talking to somebody in a job interview, right? There's some vulnerability that helps you throughout this entire process. And I've struggled with that. And I think it's something that everybody would value from really embracing.
Yeah.
Every time when I look for a job, I agree that I feel like I learned so much. It's such a transformation process, right? Like you've grown so much, you learn so much about yourself, how you handle stress, how you what kind of work you like, what gives you energy. Like it's a masterclass of self-growth and self-development in many ways.
Yeah.
So speak to the vulnerability part.
Yeah.
And it also allows you to ask those questions of the recruiter, or the if you are actually interviewing for a job, to be able to say, this isn't right for me. I'm gonna pause the process and come from that. Because you need to be vulnerable to be able to understand, like, this is what I need out of the job. Is this going to be able to provide that? Which I think is really powerful.
And by the way, that blows away the hiring manager. They don't forget that, and they'll call you 2 years later. Like, I know, because it's like, wow, you have enough confidence and understanding of yourself that this is not right for you. It doesn't happen enough, actually. And you really, you can build great relationships that way. Funny enough. Even if it's not
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it definitely resonates. Let's say with LinkedIn member Nathan, awareness around yourself is hugely demonstrated by being vulnerable, right? This is actually something that's very highly valued. It's a good soft skill to showcase. And then I think Ellen and Lily, both of your experience and tips have been really, really helpful and deeply resonated with our members. And so, Phil, what's coming up next after this?
First of all, thank you, Lily and Alan and Shivi again. Amazing. And everybody who's here today. Next week, we have the fourth and final part of this series, where we're going to talk about the negotiations and the interview process, and this really key tool called Job Mission with OKRs that really helps you drive and impress and drive alignment and set yourself up to succeed. So super excited about that. We have a couple people with us who went through the whole process and then really negotiated well and set themselves up, and we'll be hearing from them next week. But I just want to say thank you to all of you. And I want to say my book is dedicated to my mom, who died 10 years ago. Her nickname was Chick, C-H-I-C. I have a photo of her here. And she started the first council in 1960 in San Fernando Valley. You see that? That's a high school photo. And I just want to thank my mom. I want to thank Chick for pioneering this method that's important to, and beating it into me, because I didn't want to ask for help either, and I was growing like, well, I can do this by myself. No, you got to ask for help, and it finally sunk in. And I know she's smiling from wherever she is right now at the joy that her work is bringing to so many people. So thank you, Ma.
Thank you, Chick. And
thank you, Chick. It made a huge impact in my life and in my search. So thank you, Phil, for carrying on the memory, and definitely get the book, put the work in, take the time to actually go through it, because it's hugely impactful and sets you up for success and happiness.
Yeah, thank you. I just echo that. It's great to be with everybody today.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it also resonated with our community as well. Lots of folks are excited to check out the Job Search Console, and this amend to Chick for champion this approach, and a beautiful memory of her. All right, thanks everybody for joining us today, and thank you for our panelists, Ellen, Lily, and Phil. I hope you learn a lot from today's session. I certainly feel like I learn a lot, so thank you for doing that, and I look forward to seeing many of you next week. To closing out this special series, and it's arguably the biggest part, right? The taking the test, right? The interview, the negotiation. So I'm excited to dive in and learn more there as well. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. See you next week.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.